Explore the life of famed artist Frida Kahlo as she channels the pain from a crippling injury as well as her tumultuous marriage and many heated affairs into beautiful artwork that will cement her place as one of the greatest artists of all time. Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be going over the 2002 drama Frida. The film opens in a colorful house in Mexico that's covered with art. Frida Kahlo is lying in bed as a group of men lift her bed into a truck and begin driving off somewhere. The film then cuts to the past and we see Frida as a schoolgirl. She rushes to some of her friends and tells them that famed painter Diego Rivera is in their auditorium and has a naked model with them. They all rush there and watch as Diego's wife Lupe comes in and accuses him of cheating on her with the model. Diego begins to fool around with the model after Lupe leaves until Frida calls out that Lupe is coming back. Diego panics but soon realizes that the kids are playing a prank on him as they all sneak away. We then see Frida sleeping with her boyfriend Alex before sneaking downstairs to her family and getting her sister Christy to distract their mother while Alex sneaks out of the house. Christy is getting married soon and talks to Frida about her wedding dress, but Frida isn't interested in ever getting married herself. She goes and talks with her father, who is an artist, and she talks to him about how she never wants to be married. The family gathers for a photo, and Frida's mother Matilda is irritated when Frida comes down for the photo in a suit instead of a dress. One day, Frida is traveling with Alex and a friend on the bus when it crashes, and Frida is left seriously injured, with the doctors not believing that she'll ever be able to walk again. She's eventually brought home from the hospital but is bedridden and in a cast. As she lays in bed, Frida overhears her parents trying to figure out how they're going to afford her surgeries when her boyfriend Alex comes to visit. He tells her that he's going to be leaving town for a trip to Europe and he probably won't be coming back. Frida is upset and tells him to get out. While she's depressed over being stuck in bed, Frida channels her pain into art, and eventually her parents gift her with an easel so it's easier for her to paint in bed. One day, Frida's parents come home and she tells them that she has a surprise for them, and to everyone's amazement, Frida is able to slowly walk towards them. Sometime later, Frida goes and finds Diego Rivera, and she asks him to critique her artwork so she'll know if she's good enough to sell her paintings and make money to help support her parents. He has her leave behind her best painting, and later that day he stops by her house to tell her how talented she is. The film cuts to Diego taking Frida to a party where a lot of other artists are. She's introduced to a photographer named Tina and eventually meets Lupe, who is now divorced from Diego. Diego ends up debating with his friend David when David calls him a hypocrite for being a communist while still socializing with elites. The two get heated but are calmed down when Tina says she'll dance with whoever takes the biggest swig out of a bottle. Frida ends up taking the bottle from Diego and drinking the most and ends up dancing with Tina. Frida ends up joining the Communist Party alongside Diego, and after walking to Diego's house one night, the two end up sleeping together. We then see the two of them goofing around and spending lots of time with one another, and one day Diego asks Frida to marry him. Frida is hesitant because Diego is a womanizer and won't be faithful to one woman. Diego agrees that he can't be faithful to her, but he promises to be loyal to Frida, and she agrees to marry him. Frida's parents don't approve of Diego and seem uncomfortable at Frida and Diego's wedding. At the party after the wedding, Lupe gets drunk and causes a scene, hurling vicious insults at Frida. Diego is too drunk to care, and Frida storms off upset that her new husband didn't defend her. Diego apologizes that night, but in the morning, Frida comes downstairs and finds him eating breakfast that Lupe made for them. It turns out she lives in the apartment upstairs with Diego's kids, and Frida is furious. Frida storms up to the apartment and tells Lupe to leave them alone and stay out of her kitchen. Lupe invites Frida in to teach her how to make some of her recipes, and the two talk about Diego's infidelity. One day, Frida visits Diego while he's working on drawing a model in order to give him lunch and give him some critiques on the art. Frida comes back another day to bring Diego lunch, and when he's late, she realizes that it's because he was sleeping with the model. Frida is angry and tells him to take a good bath when he gets home because they're going out out that night. The two head to a bar and Frida gets drunk and sings and flirts with the other men there. A man at the bar yells at Diego to get out since the bar is for real workers, and Frida throws her drink in the man's face, causing a small fight to break out before the singing and dancing starts again. When they get home from the bar, Diego tells Frida that he was offered a job at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and he asks her to come with him. Frida agrees to go to New York and the two move there. Diego is constantly working on his paintings for the museum, so Frida occupies herself by going to the movies and having affairs with various women. We see her going to a diner with one of these women who jokes that Frida was a better partner than Diego. One night while giving Diego a bath, Frida tells him that she's pregnant. He's concerned if her body can handle the pregnancy due to her injury when she was younger, but she tells him she's used to the pain. Not long after, Frida has a miscarriage and loses the baby. She's rushed to the hospital and ends up in hysterics, demanding to see her baby even though he's dead. Once she's calmed down, Frida uses her grief to paint. Diego ends up finding this painting once she's asleep, and he cries over it in the hallway. Frida is able to come home eventually and receives a letter that her mother is seriously ill. She rushes back to Mexico and comforts her mother. She then talks with her sister Christy and finds out that Christy left her husband who was beating her. Frida spends time with her family until her mother eventually passes away. We then cut back to Diego in New York as he gets chewed out by his boss for painting Lenin on his mural for the museum. His boss is begging him to change the painting and take Lenin out because it's offending people, but Diego doesn't want to compromise his artistic vision. Crowds gather and yell at him as he paints, but when Frida returns to New York, he asks her advice and she tells him that no matter what, he's won, because his art is making people passionate about their ideals. He decides to leave the painting as is, and his boss shows up and says that they are firing him and tearing down the mural. Back at their apartment, Diego wants to try and fight for the mural, but Frida insists they should return to Mexico. They fight, but eventually Diego relents and they move back to Mexico. In their new home, Frida brings Diego some lunch in his studio, and the dog pees on one of Diego's paintings, causing him to chase it around while Frida tells him he needs help. Frida walks outside their house with her nieces and nephews and tells them that she and Diego actually have two separate houses that are connected by a bridge, and the bridge represents their love. Frida talks with Christy, and Christy says how lonely she is, mentioning that sometimes she thinks about going back to her abusive ex. Frida is horrified by the idea and offers Christy a job helping her organize Diego's studio. Frida takes Christy's kids to a fair one night, and when they return home, Frida finds Diego sleeping with Christy. Christy runs out, and Frida yells at Diego to get out. Later that night, he tries to talk to her and apologize, but she tells him that meeting him was a worse accident than her accident on the bus. Frida moves out, and we see her in a mostly empty apartment as she cuts all of her hair off and drinks. She goes and talks to Lupe, who recommends that she pay her own bills for a bit, but Lupe doesn't think that Frida's paintings are good enough for her to make money from. Frida ends up returning to her father's house and says that she'll go somewhere different every day with him and paint him. On the Day of the Dead, Frida is visiting her mother's grave when Diego shows up and says he needs a favor. He tells her that Trotsky, a famous communist philosopher, is in danger and needs a place to stay, and he asks Frida if he could stay at her father's house. Frida agrees, and we see her father's house in chaos as they prepare for Trotsky and his wife to arrive. Diego, as well as a line of armed guards, finally arrive with Trotsky. The group eats dinner, and Trotsky gives a touching speech about faith and hope. We see Trotsky looking over some of Frida's paintings, and he is clearly enamored with her work. Frida, Diego, and Trotsky are all chatting when some of the armed guards say that a mysterious package was left on the front door. The guards rush Trotsky to safety and tell everyone to get down, but Frida grabs a gun and goes outside. She fires warning shots and scares off two women who are standing outside, and she tells everyone that they were just her mother's sisters who think that the house is cursed, and that Trotsky Trotsky is the Antichrist. The group travels out to some sightseeing spots and Frida walks up to a large temple with Trotsky. The two have a deep conversation about pain and Frida learns about how all of Trotsky's kids have been killed because of his beliefs. One day, Trotsky buys a bottle of alcohol and brings it to Frida's house where they end up sleeping together. The two have an affair for a while, but eventually Trotsky's wife begins to catch on and the two have an argument. Trotsky and his wife move out of the house and go to stay somewhere else in Mexico, and Diego is confused as to why they would want to leave. Frida admits to sleeping with him, and Diego is furious and tells her that she's broken his heart. Frida ends up traveling to Paris to be featured in an exhibit about Mexican artists, and she spends her time dining and having an affair with some women. She also writes a letter to Diego where she talks about how much she misses him and loves him. We see someone try and kill Trotsky and his wife, and Diego comes to visit Frida in Paris and tell her that people believe he wants to kill Trotsky, so he's going to run away to California. One night, Frida goes to a bar and gets drunk. Meanwhile, Trotsky is murdered. Frida ends up returning to Mexico where she's detained and questioned by the police over his murder. Christy comes and visits her and the two make up before Frida is eventually released from prison. Frida's health is getting worse and she has to go to the doctor's office to get a large brace for her chest. He then spots some gangrene on her feet and is forced to amputate some of her toes. Diego eventually returns from Mexico and he and Frida end up back together. We see a montage of their lives together and Frida's health continues to degenerate until we see her shouting in pain for her sister to come give her morphine. One day, Frida and Diego fight as she tries to get her fake leg and get out of bed, but he's trying to convince her to stay put. The doctor comes in and asks what's going on, and Frida tells him that she has an art show tonight and it's always been her dream to have a show in her own country. The doctor tells her that she needs to stay in bed, and we see Diego at the show instead giving a speech about Frida. Just then, some men burst in holding Frida's bed, and she says that she technically didn't break the doctor's rules because she never got out of bed. Everyone celebrates, and we see Frida and Diego in bed together as they celebrate 25 years together. We then see a painting of Frida lying beneath a skeleton in bed, and the painting begins to set on fire as Frida smiles. Click one of the videos on screen for more.